Hey there boys, I don't know if I've told you this before, but there are actually a lot of ways to do damage in Destiny. And there are already a lot of popular options out there, things like Strength Titan, Izanagi's Burden, Wither Horde, all that kind of thing, but I feel like something that not a lot of people are using in a lot of places is actually Merciless. And Merciless has been an absolute top dog for at least a year now. The gun is absolutely insane, so let's take a look at how you can use it and why you should be. So first things first, let's look at the perks. Merciless basically has two of the most insane perks in the entire game for any DPS weapon, and I honestly think that that's why it's so powerful. Fusion rifles themselves aren't actually very good for DPS, but the absolutely wild perks on Merciless sort of make up for that. That's where the gun stands. And what are these perks? Essentially it has a perk that makes it increase its fire rate as you hit shots, or in this case it's going to be charge time, but that is essentially fire rate when it comes to fusion rifles. And it also has a 50% damage buff, which is pretty much the highest damage buff in the game you can have for multiple shots. To my knowledge, the only exception to that is going to be recombination, which is a 100% buff, but obviously that only applies to one shot, and I believe that you also have a similar effect from misdirection, which is also just, again, not a relevant damage perk, but Impetus, 50% damage buff to all your shots for a duration of time, absolutely insane. So you've essentially got the best damage perk in the game and a fire rate perk making the gun shoot exponentially faster just for hitting shots, not even getting more kills. And if we had this on a shotgun, this gun would just be beyond broke and it would be better than most heavy weapons. So it's definitely very well balanced by being on a fusion rifle. To put this in perspective, Merciless's DPS, aka the rate that it does damage at, is very similar to that of doing shotgun swapping, the damage of two weapons just packed into one here. And its total damage is almost the highest of any special weapon in the game, only being surpassed by some snipers or slugs that have 4 times the charm. It is the highest total damage special in the game aside from 4 times the charm weapons. And the only reason that 4 times the charm makes those weapons win out is because 4 times the charm literally doubles your total damage. The only contest to this is trench barrel aggressive frame shotguns coming in at a pretty similar amount of total damage, but at quite a bit slower rate of doing the damage. So I definitely rate Merciless very high. So that is going to be why you should use Merciless, but now let's look at how you should actually use it, because there is a little bit of a learning curve, and you do need to get a kill to get the most out of it. However, even if you aren't able to get a kill, it still does pretty similar damage and total damage to that of shotguns, which is much better than your average fusion rifle. So if you do need the range of a fusion rifle for the team comp you're in, then you should definitely be taking Merciless over any of the others, as long as you can give up that exotic slot. But getting into how to use it. The obvious use case for Merciless is going to be pairing it with Apex Predator, simply because they have the same surge, so you can use the same surge mod for both of them. And Apex is more in reach for everybody than it's ever been. With the new wish quests that dropped this week, free-to-play players are able to get it very easily without even doing the oob on the Dreaming City, and obviously players who don't raid can also get it pretty easily through this method. The pairing is also very natural, with Apex being pretty much the best rocket launcher in the game. Pairing it with one of the best specials in the game obviously makes for a lot of damage. But you still need to make an efficient way of routing out using your weapons to really unload them in a good timely manner, especially with Merciless being a fusion rifle and having a very slow spin up time to get up to speed. I think it's one of the harder weapons to make a rotation with because of how much you really have to commit to it to get use out of it, considering you have to get a kill with it, reload it, and then you pretty much need to dump the entire magazine so that way you're shooting more of your ammo with the high fire rate, otherwise you're going to run out of time to do damage before you can shoot all of your shots. Something that I like to do to deal with this is to pretty much dump out a magazine of Merciless after getting the kill perk, and then switch to my kinetic, use it to proc bait and switch, and then shoot my rocket, and dump as many rockets as I can in that period, either using rain of fire, grapple reloads, or anything like that, just to shoot a bunch of rockets. Once I run out of instant reloads for the rocket, I will switch back to the Merciless and try to set up that cycle again. And if you can shoot 4 or 5 rockets with each time you do that, you end up with a very graceful rotation that doesn't take too long to get some of the highest damage in the game. The approximate total damage of Apex and Merciless is going to add up to be over 5 million. And if you're adding in like a damage super and any other abilities, and maybe you're doing some other stuff, you could easily get over 6 million with it if you can get the entire reserve out. However, we need to remember that these theoretical numbers often don't end up reflecting in game. Remember, these numbers are actually only able to be gotten on 2 bosses because they don't have any sort of damage multipliers on them. If you didn't know, most bosses in the game actually have a sort of damage multiplier. For example, bosses like Caretaker take more damage numbers, so the numbers are just bigger. They also tend to have more health though. Whereas a boss like Tanix actually has a negative damage multiplier, so you do less damage than the base expected amount, and you end up with just smaller overall numbers, even though your performance wasn't any different. However, specifically the Ogre boss on Grasp and also the Templar have exactly 1.0 for their damage scaler, so they are like the baseline values for all of the numbers that most people use in the community. So don't be disappointed if you're not getting the exact numbers that are theoretically made up here from the amount of damage that they can do. You're still probably doing very well just by unloading all your shots and having your search mods and your buffs stacked properly. So the final thing I want to do is walk you through an actual practical rotation you can try to duplicate yourself. But really quickly before I get into that, I do want to thank everybody who has been watching the videos. Your support means a lot to me, especially with the game being in a pretty slow spot right now. I really appreciate everybody who has been watching and engaging. If you want to make my day, please leave a comment. I love getting to read them. And if you're a regular viewer here, make sure to subscribe to see everything I make. Anyways, let's go ahead and look at the rotation you can do now and sort of break it down into steps for people to replicate. Now, I am at the Enclave to actually do this demonstration in a controlled environment, but remember that when you are shooting a boss, the Merciless is going to be ramping up its fire rate a ton, and this is going to go by a lot faster. So first thing, you'll need to get your kill, you'll need to reload it, and remember you will get an increased reload speed from getting the kill with Merciless. After that, you're going to dump 7 shots. You want to leave 1 more if you're not using something to reload it in the background like Rain of Fire. That way you'll be able to come back to it without reloading later. Then you use your kinetic to proc bait and switch and shoot rockets. Do your dumping method, and once you're unable to reload anymore, I like to shoot more kinetic if you have a good weapon, and then set up the Merciless setup again, and dump your mag down to 1 again. And once you're out, go back to your kinetic for bait and switch and shoot more rockets. And you can pretty much repeat this over and over to get a good effect. And remember that during damage in my setup here, you would have been getting more grenades back from damage, you would have had a better fire rate, you would have had rewind rounds on your sniper. So there's a lot of things going wrong here because I'm not shooting an actual enemy. But in the actual raid encounter, you're going to see a lot of things stacking up here in your favor. And again, you could sort of do whatever you want to dump off rockets. You could use the dodge on Hunter, you could use Dragon's Shadow and get another dodge that way. You could obviously use grapple melee on all 3 classes, you could use Rain of Fire, you could use Radiant Dance Machines on Hunter and dump all the rockets. If you are going to take that route, you should just do the Merciless and the rocket separately and not try to mix them back and forth. But otherwise, that is definitely the outline of a very strong rotation for getting a ton of damage out. And that is a setup that will work on most bosses. Even if you don't have access to adds to kill, Merciless still really does hold up really well. However, I do say most bosses because this is like a 30 to 40 second damage rotation depending on how fast you do it. So this is going to be for the full damage duration bosses that have like the 30-second damage phases, like the War Priest and things like that. You're not going to want to use this on something like Atrax or any of the burst damage encounters from the bosses that have very little health because you won't be able to get the damage out quick enough. When it comes to something like Atrax or anything like that, you want to get your damage out really fast in just the first 3 seconds, and stuff like that's going to be, Fourth Horseman, a Lament combo, Parasite, things like that. That's going to be how you get the most damage out quickly. However, I would certainly crown Merciless the absolute king of the 30-second plus damage phase encounters. And that's going to do it for the video. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it to the end, make sure you subscribe, like, comment, all that, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye-bye.